Let my best friend move in with me, but I learned that she tells horrible lies to her coworkers that I am abusing her. So I told her she has a week to move because I am booting her out. I have my own 2-bedroom apartment that used to belong to my uncle. I made a friend during my university years, Mary. Mary had quite a hard home life. I let her know that if she ever needed my help, she could always rely on me. When we graduated, I asked her to move in with me rent-free. She tried to pay, but I knew she had a lot of debt trying to pay for uni, so I told her no and to spend her money freeing herself from it. She was so thankful for this, and I loved having her life with me. We never fought about anything. Both of us had the same cleaning habits and TV interests, so there's never any arguments over the remote or who has to take out the bins. Tonight we were out at a super fancy restaurant in London as Mary had finally paid off the last of her debt, secured herself an amazing promotion at her job, and also finally passed her driving test. All these achievements in the same month were more than deserving of an award, so we splashed out. It was me, Mary, 4 of her work friends, and 2 friends we've known since uni. It was a great night, until I handed Mary a card saying amazing she is and how lucky I am to have her as my best friend, with quite a bit of cash inside to put towards her first car. She started crying and thanking me, and we hugged for a long time. When she pulled away, I told her I was so proud of her for kicking life in the butt, becoming successful, and showing her dad that his dickhead ways couldn't keep her down. After how she'd struggled through uni, pushing pennies together, and working poop jobs, seeing her in her dream career and being such an accomplished woman is absolutely inspiring to me. She looked mad and said, "Please don't do that. You know I don't like it when you do that." She'd never said anything like this to me ever, so I'd have no idea where this was coming from. I apologized and said that I didn't realize saying these things would upset her, as it's never been my intention. She just scoffed and rolled her eyes, and when I looked up at her colleagues, they were all shaking their heads at me and glaring. I felt so awkward I wanted to shrink back into my own skin, and I was mortified that I hurt Mary. Mary didn't talk to me for the rest of the night and ignored me at the table. When we split up to head home, none of her colleagues even looked at me as they left. I said sorry to Mary as she was heading to her room returning, but she just shrugged me off, told me she was tired and that we'd talk in the morning. I was so anxious that she wanted to move out and never talk to me again. I keep going over every interaction in my head to see if I crossed the line in the past, but she never gave any indication that I upset her saying these things before. All her colleagues messaged me saying I was an a-hole for saying those things to her and belittling her, but I never ever meant any of those things like that. Update 1. 10 a.m. I got a call from one of the uni friends who was at the dinner last night, and we had a chat. She asked me if everything was okay between me and Mary, as she said she'd never seen Mary snap at me like that until last night. She reaffirmed many of my feelings about this being very odd character for Mary, as she had also congratulated Mary and said similar things, as well as given her a bit of money and a card, along with an expensive gift, as did many of the others. After talking to my friend, I've decided that I need to have a long sit-down with Mary to clear things up, and it's not only me who's confused by her behavior. Both the uni friends are coming round later to have a chat, since now we're honestly quite concerned about her. Update 2. 4 p.m. Poop really hit the fan and went sideways in a way I never imagined. I'm confused, heartbroken, and really pissed off now. The one I had spoken to earlier on the phone, we'll call Claire, said she'd call one of the work colleagues that she knows slightly well in order to clear things up. Let's call the colleague Jane. Jane turned up at the flat and instantly looked pissed. I almost wanted to hide behind the kitchen counter when she came in glaring daggers at me. We all sat down and I let Jane know that I'd spoken to Mary about last night and that she was fine, but I was still confused. Jane then laughed and said, "Oh, don't try that poop with me. You can't just pretend now that you've been exposed in public." The 3 of us looked at her without saying a word, as we were all confused now. Claire asked her what she meant, and Jane said that she knew how I really treated Mary. We both asked her to elaborate, and she stood up and went on this tirade about how I apparently regularly abuse and belittle Mary, then intimidate her into saying nothing about it and put on a smile for others. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry at this point. She then showed me her text with Mary, where Mary wrote to her in distress about being locked in her room because I was having a meltdown about her making friends at work, something that never happened. Claire and my other friend took the phone and looked through the messages as well, and I had to stop reading them as they all said stuff about how Mary was a friend of me and that I trapped her here and was extorting out of her. It all just leaves me numb and that inside. We went over a lot of the stuff in the messages and realized that Mary had been spreading lies about me to all her colleagues about how I was abusive and she couldn't move out because I was charging her so much rent money. It took a long time, but after Claire and my friend went over all the accusations with Jane, and I pulled up my bank details to show that Mary never makes a single payment to me except for her half of the bills, she seemed to cool down and settled into the same confusion we were all feeling. Claire had to calm me down as I couldn't stop crying no matter what I did for ages. It was quite embarrassing, but I just couldn't do anything else. Jane went quiet by the end of our discussion and left without saying much, so I don't know what that means for me in her eyes. My 2 friends are staying with me for the rest of the day until Mary comes home. We've all got a lot of questions for her to answer. Update 3. 10:15 p.m. When she got home and saw the 3 of us watching television, she got excited and said she'd make popcorn, but Claire took the lead and told her to sit down. She looked confused but complied. Claire led everything. I didn't really know what to say to Mary at all and could barely make eye contact with her. Claire told her that Jane had been round and yelled at me for being an abuser and a bully and asked her why she'd say those things. Mary acted confused and said that it must all just be a miscommunication, that Jane just twists things sometimes and she must have misunderstood stuff she'd said. Then Claire asked about the text messages and started mentioning each event that Mary had cried to Jane about me being an awful person. Jane went quiet and then tried to say it was a work joke, but Claire wasn't having any of it. She pushed harder about all of this and eventually Mary broke. She started crying and telling us that she never meant any of it, that it was a stupid thing and it shouldn't matter, that she loved me with everything she had, and it was just a stupid story that went too far. She started begging me for forgiveness, but I was just so tired and still am. I looked her in the eyes for the first time and told her she had a week to find a place and move out. Then she started really bawling her eyes out and begging me to let her stay, that she didn't think it would matter because I don't work with them. But I told her I was not having that kind of bullshit in my life. I then said, so do you just make up lies about everyone in your life? Is any of it real? She went really quiet, dead silent at that point. I didn't want to believe it, but the way she was looking at me and the lies she'd meant up about me, abusing her had me questioning everything she'd ever told me when we were at uni together, about her dad beating her mom, about her being homeless from 16 until they divorced. I then told her to get her mom on the phone and she panicked and begged me not to. Claire then realized where I was going with this and asked her if everything we'd ever been told about her dad had been true, and she cracked and said she may have embellished a few things. We learned that Mary's tragic life story had been nothing but a concoction to gain sympathy from others. Her parents had divorced but there was no abuse involved. They just fell out of love and split. I had to learn this by calling her mother myself later on to get clarity. So it turns out my best friend is a master manipulator and probably always has been. I am so tired and exhausted on this whole nightmare. Final update. Mary moved out the following Saturday of the incident. She spent the following days after the blow-up moping around the flat and wanting to talk to me, but I refused and told her I needed space. The day she moved out I stayed in my room and just hid away, but she knocked on my door before she left, and I answered. I still wanted to say goodbye. She had been my closest friend for so long that it didn't feel right just letting her fade out of my life without a send-off. She asked me if I wanted the money I gave her for her new car back, but I said no and told her to use it instead for therapy. She cried a lot and tried to hug me, but I kept her at a distance. I let her know this would be the final time we would ever see or speak to each other. I just couldn't be around her anymore with the knowledge of what she'd done. She left sobbing, and when she was gone, my little town flat felt suddenly bigger than it ever had before. I met with Jane for coffee as she'd asked me to meet up and clear up some details. She told me she'd been wondering about why Mary would make me the target of her abuse story, and started asking people in her office about the things Mary had said about me in the past. One that stood out was a painter who used his art as a means of channeling his traumatic history with his abusive stepmother. Apparently, Mary had taken quite a liking to him, and so she had first told him about her abuse as a way of getting closer to him. She'd mentioned fancying him in the past, but I didn't think she'd go to such lengths to create a connection between them. He'd been furious when he heard the truth, and now doesn't speak to her anymore. Jane told me not many people do now. They were now all worried that she'd make up stuff about them and get them in trouble at work, so they're keeping her at arm's length as a result.